All right, we're going to get right into it. This video has lies, deception, intrigue, cover-ups, criminal charges, and we're going to get right into it. First of all, I want you guys to know that the pharmaceutical business, the pharmaceutical industry, they do not spend money on television so they can gain more sales. Actually, they don't really gain a lot of sales off of TV ads. But what they do is they capture the stations because they spend so much money on advertising that they can tell them what to say and what not to say. Just like YouTube did and Facebook and all these other social media companies when COVID was all the rage and people were trying to warn you about all of this stuff and they were shutting us up. They were demonetizing our videos and many of us were deplatformed. Because the internet is so cool, I'm going way in the Wayback Machine and I want to show you a clip with Scarborough because a lot of the Democrats like Scarborough, I don't know why, and Robert Kennedy Jr. talking way back in the day about this.
My son, born in 1991, has a slight form of autism called Asperger's. But it seems, and again, when I was practicing law, and also when I was in Congress, parents would constantly come to me, and they'd bring me videotapes of their children, and they were all around the age of my son or younger.
The generation,
something happened in 1989.
Exactly. The generation, what happened was the vaccine schedule was increased. We went up from receiving about 10 vaccines in our generation to these kids received 24 vaccines. And they all had this thimerosal in them, this mercury, and nobody bothered to do an analysis of what the cumulative impact of all that mercury was doing to kids. As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe. A child on his first day that he's born is injected with a hepatitis B shot. Under EPA guidelines, he would have to be 275 pounds to safely absorb that shot.
And yet we're just constantly pumping our kids with these vaccines.
Right, and what happened was that in 1988, 1 in every 2,500 American children had autism. Today, 1 in every 166 children have autism, and plus 1 in 6 children have other kinds of learning disorders, other kinds of neurological disorders, speech delay, language disorders, ADD, hyperactivity, that all seem to be connected, that are all connected, the science shows are all connected to autism.
You know, Bobby, what we've always found, you and I could debate 1,000 different issues, whether it's Terry Schiavo or the environment, I think would agree on the environment. But in this case, you've got the federal government coming in saying, well, there's no good science. And of course, in politics, science always gets diluted. Why hasn't the federal government stepped up and worked more? Because listen, Bobby, I can't prove it tonight. You can't prove it. But intuitively, you look at the spike, you look at what happened with the thimerosal, there is no doubt in my mind, maybe it's 2 years from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, maybe it's 10 years from now, we're going to find out that the thimerosal causes, in my opinion, autism. You know,
one of the problems that America has is that it's been trained to trust the white coats, right? They put people in front of you, they get the white coats on, and all of a sudden they have authority over you, and you've been trained in that way, not even to be your own advocate, but just to say, I hear what you're saying, and I will do as I'm told. So you have to ask yourself, what happened? Why doesn't Scarborough talk like that today, right? Now I have a clip here of Robert Kennedy Jr. basically saying that all the people that make your medication are felons.
The thing that people have to understand is that the 4 companies that make all 72 of those vaccines, which is Pfizer,
Pfizer's killing
Merck, Glaxo, Merck, and Sanofi. All of those companies are convicted felons. And not only that, they're serial felons. Their business model is committing felonies. These companies, in the last 10 years collectively, have paid $35 billion in penalties, damages, fines for falsifying science, for defrauding regulators, for lying to doctors, and for killing hundreds of thousands of people. Vioxx, which was Merck's flagship product, killed between 120,000 and 500,000 Americans. This was a pill that Merck was selling as a headache pill.
Right.
And Merck knew caused heart attacks and killed people, and they didn't tell anybody. And they knew, we got the spreadsheets that show their bean counters, their accountants, and you're going to kill so many people per dose. We can still make more money, even if they all sue us. And in the end, they killed, up to 500,000 Americans. And they got away with it. They paid $7 billion in fines.
Now, the purpose for this video is for informational purposes only, because by the time this video is over, you're probably going to be scratching your head and wondering how you ever got shucked into doing this stuff. Now, here's Robert Kennedy Jr. explaining the schedule, and I want you to pay close attention on how it has been ramped up.
In 1979 and 80, when I was a kid, I only had 3 vaccines. My kids got 72 vaccines. That's what you need now to get through school, 72 doses of 16 vaccines. So, and it started changing in the 80s and 90s, but in like 1979, they brought on a vaccine called the diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccine. And that vaccine was very dangerous, and it was killing or giving severe brain damage to 1 in 300 kids. And it was pulled in the United States. It was pulled in Europe, but Bill Gates still gives it to 161 million African children every year.
The same vaccine? The
same vaccine, and to South Asian kids. And I'll tell you, we now know what that does, because the Danish government did a study called Morgensen in 2017 that showed that African kids, and that's published in a journal called eBiopharma, and it was done by the leading deities of African vaccinology, all of them pro-vaccine, people like Peter Aaby, whose name is very famous, Sigrid Morgensen, and a bunch of others. And they went to Africa and looked at that. They had 30 years of data. And Gates had gone to the Danish government and said, give us money because we've saved millions of lives with this vaccine in Africa. And the Danish government said, can you show us the data? And he couldn't. So they went to Guinea-Bissau, which is a country in the west of Africa. And Guinea-Bissau, the Danes for 30 years had been paying for these very advanced health clinics, local health clinics all over Guinea-Bissau. And the clinics were weighing every child at 3 months and every child and at 6 months. And in the 80s, they began, or 90s, they began, or the 80s, they began giving the DTP vaccine at the first visit, a 3-month visit. But if they didn't hit the child exactly, if they didn't have full 90 days, of age, if they were 89 days, they wouldn't give it to them the 6-month visit. As it turns out, they had 30 years of data where half the kids were vaccinated and half the kids were not between 2 months and 5 months of age. So it was a perfect natural experiment. And they went in there and they looked at it. They looked at 30 years of data, and they found the girls who got that vaccine, the DTP vaccine, were 10 times more likely to die over the next 3 months than children who did not. And they weren't dying of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. They were protected against those by the vaccine. They were dying of anemia and bilharzia and malaria and pulmonary disease, but mainly they were dying of pneumonia. And what the researchers said is that the vaccine is almost certainly killing more children than diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis prior to the vaccine, because it was protecting them against the target illnesses, but it had ruined their immune systems.
Now, many of you guys know that Stacy and myself, we've lived like the Amish for the last 15 years. There's one group of people that you could actually look at to see if this stuff is actually true. Like, are autism rates connected to...
How many children or people are totally unvaccinated? Is that where do you find? Is it just the parents that stepped up and said? I would think that's a very small percentage, because so many of us blindly followed, the recommendations to vaccinate children.
Yeah, it's less than 1% of the public. So the Amish are a perfect example of a large group of people who are largely unvaccinated. And there's we can't find an autistic kid who was unvaccinated. It's very, very rare in the Amish community, very, very rare. You won't find kids with ADD, with autoimmune disease, with panda pans, with epilepsy. You just don't find any of these chronic diseases in the Amish. And you know, the U.S. government has been studying the Amish for decades, but there's never been a report out to the public. The reason, of course, is it would show that, oh, if you don't follow our guidelines, you're going to end up healthier. That's why there's no report. After decades of studying the Amish, there's no report, because the report would be devastating to the narrative. It would show that the CDC has been harming the public for decades and saying nothing and bearing all the data.
Now listen, I could go on and on and on with this video and all the proof and everything else about people dying suddenly, falling over all over the place, athletes, newscasters, all over the place. I could make this video go on and on and on. Right now, I want to talk about Rand Paul, who is going after Fauci, kind of going to try to hold him accountable, but it's not on all the real stuff, right? The meat. The meat is crimes against humanity, not lying about gain of function, okay? But Rand Paul is actively going after him. This is from earlier last year.
Senator Rand Paul is coming for Dr. Anthony Fauci. The Kentucky Republican has referred the former White House advisor for criminal charges, potentially. Paul is demanding a perjury probe accusing Fauci of lying under oath during testimony before a Senate committee in 2021. Paul said in a statement, Dr. Fauci testified that the NIH does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In a subsequent hearing, I warned Dr. Fauci of the criminal implications of lying to Congress and offered him an opportunity to recant his previous statements.
In July 2021, Fauci testified how his former department has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Senator Paul has also made an official criminal referral to Attorney General Merrick Garland. The Department of Justice has not responded to Paul's request.
On January 9th, 2024, Dr. Anthony Fauci admitted during congressional testimony that the 6-foot social distancing mandate, quote, sort of just appeared, end quote.
Dr. Anthony Fauci now admitting social distancing wasn't based on science. Fauci telling a House committee this week the idea, standing 6 feet apart, quote, just sort of appeared. The shocking admission comes nearly 4 years after statements like this.
Every aspect of that ending the COVID outbreak in 30 days has some aspect of it of physical separation, whether that's avoiding crowds, whether that's staying 6 feet away from people, whether that's doing teleworking, all of it does that.
Dr. Fauci also forced Americans to wear masks after admitting that they don't work.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
And remember when he said that the COVID vaccine would stop you from getting infected?
The situation is so clear, the data affirm, if you get vaccinated, you are protected, even with the Delta variant.
And while voices of dissent were silent, a Republican president and a Democratic president and their political parties and their members of Congress made the same choice to hand the keys of our nation over to Dr. Fauci. Then they stood by and watched as he destroyed our schools, our churches, our businesses, and our economy. Under their watch, we ended up having the highest death rate from COVID in the world.
So as you heard right there, they're going after Dr. Fauci because he lied to Congress, which is not really the scope of what we need him to be tried for, which is crimes against humanity. That was last year. Now, here's the latest clip of Rand talking about getting Dr. Fauci, but he's afraid of the Biden pardon.
Your reaction to this. This is from Politico. This came out yesterday, I believe. Biden White House discussing preemptive pardons for those in Trump's crosshairs. And it says, those who could face exposure include such members of Congress as Jan 6 Committee Senator-elect Adam Schiff, GOP Rep Liz Cheney, also mentioned by Biden aides, is a pardon for Anthony Fauci, the former head of the NIAID, who became a lightning rod for criticism during COVID. Now, we're told that the president isn't part of this formulation, that it's coming from staffers, and that these individuals, as far as we know, have not asked for a pardon. But what's your take on the fact that this is under discussion?
I think it's a real possibility that Anthony Fauci could get a pardon. He is at risk. I've referred him twice to the Department of Justice. The Biden administration has ignored it, but we have a great deal of evidence that he lied to Congress, which is a felony punishable by 5 years. The proof that we have that he's lying is from his own emails. So we have his private emails gotten by court order, and they contradict what he was saying publicly in a way such that I think we could prove that he has lied to Congress, which is a felony. As far as other pardons, I fully suspect the president will pardon his brother coming up too. He's protecting Hunter, who has a criminal record, a long and storied criminal record, taking $80,000 a year from a large business in Ukraine. I think also there will be a consideration of whether or not President Biden may want to pardon himself as well. So I think the Biden syndicate of making money did act illegally, and who knows, maybe the president will even pardon himself.
I'm not sure if you know this or not, the House of Representatives just had a hearing on the pandemic and the response, and it was pretty damn. Basically saying that the whole thing was a scam, they should have never locked down, and the pandemic response was disastrous. I know we talk a lot about the pandemic and all the bad stuff about it, but I want to share with you guys a positive story that's coming out of this. A lot of people are suing their former employers because they were fired from their jobs because they would not capitulate, okay? And all their exemptions and whatever they tried to say, and the employers forced it upon them or then terminate them. She was an IT specialist at Blue Cross for over 30 years. She was fired because she wouldn't take the bio jab because she's a devout Catholic. And after suing for religious discrimination, she won $12.7 million. And there are other stories like hers. You just have to search them out. They don't want you to hear that people are actually winning. Just want to end this video with you guys understanding that this is just not about the last pandemic, okay? This is about the yearly poke that everyone tries to get in their arms. In the last video, I'm not sure if you watched that video or not, but please do. It explains to you about injecting foreign things into your body and how it has adverse effects on your health, okay? I'm gonna leave you guys with this clip right here. Hopefully it rings true with you guys. Please share this video with your friends. We need to get this information into the public square. The captured media will not share these stories with the folks. And if we don't get the views on this video, and if people don't see this video, they're never really gonna understand what's going on. Yeah, what's going on. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Make sure you hit that thumbs up, and please share the video and stay vigilant. And you can look this up, fact check it all you want. The third leading cause of death in America are doctors.
In a million years, I would not take the flu shot, and I'll tell you why, because this is what Cochrane and BMJ have found. People who take the flu shot are protected against that strain of flu. They're 4.4 times more likely to get a non-flu infection. And you might find, and a lot of people do, that they get the flu shot and then they get sick. They're usually not getting the flu. They're getting something that is indistinguishable from the flu, because the flu shot gives you something called pathogenic priming. It injures your immune system so that you're more likely to get a non-flu viral upper respiratory infection. In fact, the Pentagon published a story, and you can cite this, it's by Wolfe, W-O-L-F-E, in January of this year, in which they said that the flu shot not only primes you for flu, but it primes you for coronavirus. They had a placebo group, and they had a vaccine group because they wanted for military readiness to see if the flu shot was prophylactic against coronavirus. What they found is actually the people who got the flu shot were 36% more likely to get coronavirus. And that's not a lone study. We found 6 other major studies that say the same thing. If you get the flu shot, you're more likely to get coronavirus. Look, all you have to do, Alan, and this is what Cochrane said, is look what's happened to longevity in the elderly since we started mandating the flu shot to elderly people. Those are the people who their life expectancy has dramatically gone down as the flu shot proliferated. And if you see, the people who died during the COVID crisis, and there's no science on this, but it's observational. It tended to be people who got their flu shots, people who were in nursing home who all get flu shots, people who are first responders who get flu shots.
So with all due respect, I don't understand the implications of your position. If you're right, why wouldn't it follow that the flu shot should be illegal? You said it's criminal to mandate the flu shot because it kills people in my age category. So if you had to cast the deciding vote, if you had decided to run for Congress instead of doing the great work you've done over so many years, and you were the deciding vote in the United States Senate, and there was a bill to outlaw the flu shot, why wouldn't you vote for it if you think
I'm kind of a free market. I think, what I'm against mandates. I think that, there may be situations where, where that product might do some good for somebody, but I just don't believe it should be mandated. I wouldn't think, for example, that Viagra should be mandated to every human being on the planet, right? But there may be somebody who says, I want to take that medication. Let them do it.
Look,
let's not order everybody to do it.